a granddaughter of some of the people I'll be speaking about today, Jenny Franklin and Dr. Karl Connell. And Jenny Franklin was adopted by Clarence Roof, who was the one who developed the Wintoon Preserve. So the story of Winton Preserve, the story of Clarence Roof and his vision for a fishing preserve, and Roof's adoptive daughter, Jenny Franklin, and spouse, Dr. Karl Connell, inventor of the first American gas mask for World War I. Thank you. On the west branch of the Neversync River, Clarence Roof in 1880 is seen here on the porch of the Parker Place, joining the Neversink Fishing Club. Clarence Roof from Cooperstown, New York, makes his fortune in his company, Good Roof & Co., as an importer of pharmaceuticals, olive oil, and fine wines. The biggest seller was Carter's Little Liver Pills, a cure-all for headache, constipation, dyspepsia, and biliousness, an early form of a laxative. Roof marries Kate Hoyt in 1868. Roof sells his business to his partners and moves to Lakewood, New Jersey in the winter and enjoys summers in the Catskills. Roof's many interests include fishing, horses, piano, photography, and acquiring all the lands for his large preserve. Setting the stage. As the tanning industry peaks during the Civil War and dwindles by 1870, the last hemlocks were felled and a new way to tan hides chemically was developed by the end of the Civil War. With the hemlocks all gone, the local industry dies in the Neversink and many properties are abandoned for taxes. Roof retires from his business to pursue fishing full-time and purchases the Parker Place in 1882 from Martin Parker. Parker mentions that his great-grandfather, an Indian chief named Wintoon, hunted the area. Roof liked the name and decided to call his place Wintoon. The Parker Place, the Wintoon property is on your way up towards the Frost Valley YMCA. And the Parker Place houses are no longer on the property, but they would have been on the lower fields below where the main Wintoon house was. And in this picture, you see the bear skin hanging for drying on the side there. So this is a layout of the entire property. You have Winton Lodge, which was built around 1886. He had a lodge, a guest house. This would have been a laundry house. This would have been the Parker Place. We have the remains of the Parker Place, I believe, in here. And this building was completely taken apart. There was at one point a windmill, a series of barns. So you had work sheds, animal shelter, including a little dog house here. Also a laundry, I think I mentioned that. Spring house for refrigeration. This would have been another house for workers on the property. I believe these are the horse barns, and this would have been the cow barns, and a lot of extra little buildings to support what was basically you're building a small village 20 miles from any other town. He even had a shop for ironworking and stuff. In the back is the sheep's meadow. And then across the stream, he built a bridge and a little bungalow for his relations. And a 4-hole golf course and croquet. This is Roof and Friends in front of Winton Lodge in 1900. So construction of Winton Lodge overlooking the Parker Place starts in 1886. Roof requires additional properties over 15 years to own over 4,000 acres and 5 miles of stream. You have to imagine at this time that all of these properties, there is no work available, and all of these people are having a very hard time making a subsistence living. Roof goes through and buys all these people out. The name of the farm properties he acquired name our fishing holes today. So we have the Castle and Beetle House, the Whipple House, Jones, Parker, which is where the Wintoon is, Leroy, Briggs, and Shook. The present day stone house on the property was built above an original guardhouse against poaching. The Beetle Farm, which is somewhere down in here, the Beetle Farm was, the Beetle Farm is now the present house in the camp property, the white picket fence for, I think they do something with little children. That's, why is this not working? There we go. And it was also once home for the Women's Fly Fishing Club. Wintoon circa 1900, neither of the original houses exist today in Frost Valley, West Branch of the Neversink. So this might have been the Parker house down here, and this would have been the lodge, and this would have been considered the guest house. This is a much later day picture. 1886, the lodge is still there, and the 1930s guest house the guest house was rebuilt due to a fire in the 1930s. Dr. Connell added glass to most of the sitting porches in the lodge. So the lodge is built in an Adirondack style logs and with the bark on the surface and large overhanging roofs. There's a winter scene. And this sort of gives an example of the overhanging roofs. It would have been cantilevered with the bark on the wood. A lot of it's chipped off. You get ants that come in underneath it, and it all gets chipped off after years and years. Wintoon Lower Barns, horse barn. I believe this is the horse barn. Cow barn, a blacksmith shop, pigsties, chicken coops, and work shed circa 1900. All of the black and white photographs you're looking at would have been taken by Mr. Roof himself. He was an avid photographer. The spring house, where early refrigeration took place using the constant running water of Cold Spring to keep the milk jugs cold. You can see a milk jug here, and this would have been inserted into the flowing cold water that went past to keep things cold. And this is below, you'll just see it as a raw structure if you drive past. Additional lower ponds create views from Wintoon. This was something that Roof was proud of doing, was creating all the additional ponds for livestock and also just for enjoyment of the place. Summertime. The number 2 hole in the 4-hole golf course in the lower fields of Wintoon, surrounded by cattle. Winton lower fields and cattle. Roof tried to commercially raise sheep, but was unsuccessful due to poor soil and local predators like bobcat and Catskill panther. So that the sheep would have been, you tried to raise it here. They also tried to import heather, and that was unsuccessful in establishing, but our side thing that we get from the heather is the lovely purple thyme that we have all over our properties. Field dedicated to food production for everyone in the state. So you can just imagine what it takes to create your own personal village, you know, just the amount of staff, the amount of houses, and the amount of support. And it's too hard to go to and from. So you have to bring all your people are living there and working there near the place. I believe this is the bridge from the main house across the river to the bungalow and tea house. Roof kept several men watching the stream day and night against poachers. Raphael Govin's solution was to hire the worst poacher and make him in charge of keeping other poachers off. Roof expected only sportsmanlike fishing on the property to protect the fish. So this is a mill, possibly the Taylor Place, a few miles below Wintoon. Hardwood lumber, particularly maple, would have been cut and sent to Germany for the manufacture of pianos. And this is Clarence Roof on a horse in 1893 called Nellie. Clearing the road along the Neversink. Imagine how rough that was. Yes. After Wintoon Estate is built, others recognized the beauty of the Neversink and came to amass their own estates. Roof's lawyer, Raphael Gavin, after visiting Roof so many times over the years for various litigations, decided to build his own properties around the 1900s. Gavin buys around Round Pond and the lower portion of the west branch of the Neversink, where we have a little house my cousins know, the Croft. And he also buys along the east branch. This would have represented Roof's property along here, where we have Wintoon, Women's Fly Fisher, and probably not quite as far as up at the Frost Valley YMCA. Latecomer Edward Hewitt amasses his property, land around the lower part of the Neversink, around here, around the Big Bend, only to have the city appropriate a portion of his land for the New York City Reservoir. You also have the Forceman Castle, which is where the Frost Valley YMCA is, and the Teson Estate on the upper east branch of the Neversink. So we're sort of in the age of the robber barons, where there's money available before the crash of the 1920s, and people are making all these large estates. Renowned angler Theodore Gordon fishes in Neversink around the Big Bend. And then you have also a Mr. LeBranch, who's also a lead angler of his day, known for fishing up there. The Neversync Reservoir started construction in 1941. The dam completed in 1950. Fill capacity is 34.9 billion gallons of water. This is Raphael Gavin, attorney to Clarence Roof, and I'm showing you him and his house Rio Alto on the east branch of the Neversink. So as a side note, salmon salmotruta, also known as the brown trout, is introduced to us from Europe as early as 1983 and around 1886. It was first stocked in Aden Brook, a tributary of the Neversync River, where this trout tends to overdominate the native brook trout for habitat. I know our present fishing club is determined not to do stocking of trout these days, to try to give the native brook trout a better fighting chance. And they are very pleased with the results of native trout coming back in. Clarence Roof and spouse Kate Hoyt had everything but were childless. Entered Jenny Franklin Hovey Roof, invited Roof invited my grandmother's older sister with her family to come and stay at Wintoon. My grandmother, Jenny Franklin Hovey Roof Connell, known as Frankie or Frank, came with her sister at the age of 16 to visit Wintoon circa 1900. Frank was an accomplished pianist at this age and could play anything she heard once. She delighted the roofs, and soon they asked her to stay as their daughter, and at age 17, she was introduced to Lakewood Society as Frank Hovey Roof. Lakewood, New Jersey was a winter residence of the Roofs. It took 2 to 3 days to travel from Lakewood to Wintoon. Start from Lakewood, which is in New Jersey, overland to Red Bank, then barges to New York City on the east side of New York City, then travel across town, then a barge from the west side of New York City up the Hudson to Kingston, then a train to Big Indian, and from Big Indian, they would offload all their horses and buggies and all the equipment and bags and all the servants and stuff. And from Big Indian, they would take horse and cart over the mountain around past the base of Slide Mountain to Wintoon. The entire household staff from Lakewood would have been an English butler named Chitsey, Mrs. Roof's personal maid, cook, scullery girl, parlor maid, laundress, groom, drayman. On the Wintoon property itself, you can imagine the large staff to run that large farm, farmers, guards, stablemen, additional household staff, carpenters, and blacksmiths.
You know what a drayman is?
It's someone who manages the horses. Photo of Jenny Franklin Hovey Roof Connell attributed to John Burroughs. At age 13, Frank was managing a full house. Her father had a stroke and her mother was ill too. This trained Frank at a young age in household management, which would prove useful for the Roofs. John Burroughs, naturalist. Frank met John Burroughs at Ymca Farms, which is near the Big Indian area, and befriended him and invited him to Wintoon. John came every season between 1914 till his death in 1921. They continued a correspondence, which is donated to the Vassar College Library. Since I'm a Vassar grad, I'm hoping to go there and get pictures of the correspondence for the family. So Frank met Dr. Connell when he came to remove a tumor from her sister's breast in 1914. They continued their correspondence for many years. One of Dr. Connell's early inventions in 1910 was the anesthetometer, which introduced a metric system of measuring gases in the US. Dr. Connell began his internship at the New York Hospital, and in 1914, Dr. Connell was also inducted into the military as a major in the medical corps and asked by Dr. Harvey Cushing to implement American field hospitals. 5 were implemented around 100 beds each. In 1917, Dr. Connell was recommended to Brigadier General Fries to help with the design for an American gas mask. Dr. Connell was recommended because of his prior skill at developing a mask for anesthesia. After reviewing prior gas mask designs, Dr. Connell determined he could make a new mask, enabling clear vision, no fogging, ease of adjustment, and foolproofness. I'm just going to cycle back. These are some of his earlier inventions. Precursor to the development of the American gas mask are Dr. Connell's inventions in the world of anesthesia. Dr. Connell does groundbreaking work in the building of the first anesthesia machine. It introduced upright metric scales that registered the flow of gas and a pair of ball bearings and boasted accuracy to the teaspoonful. This flow meter design set a new standard in the industry, which is still in use today. Shown here is the prototype with hand-labeled scales for oxygen, nitrous oxide, ethylene, and either carbon dioxide or acetylene. The machine also administered ether. The Connell anesthetometer, anesthesia delivery system designed in 1912, motorized air compressor, and finally calibrated controls set a new standard in the industry. 1913, the earliest oropharyngeal for clearing the airways for anesthetized patients, sold well into the 1960s. You would need this to keep the patients from clamping down on tubes. So this protected the tubes going into the patient. And this is all these images are courtesy of the Wood Library Museum of Anesthesiology in Chicago. Gas oxygen apparatus, 1917, for nitrous oxide, oxygen, and ether, used in the field in World War I. Dr. Connell won a Distinguished Service Medal for developing the first all-American gas mask in World War I. Innovation for the mask were a stamped brass piece. This would be a stamped brass piece with small eye lenses, a sponge rubber seal for the face. The sponge rubber provided for a gas tight fit over the face. The air canister was carried on the back of the head, and the air hose above the mouth kept the mask from fogging up. The advantages were you could see, speak, and shoot with the mask on. By dispensing with the nose and mouth clip in previous designs, this new design allowed for communication. This mask was developed in only 3 weeks' time. The design for the canister behind the head was to provide some protection from spinal injuries due to shrapnel, as the American helmets, unlike the German helmets, offered no top of spine protection. Additionally, the canister on the back allowed for ease of shooting a pistol without having something in front of you. Another primary feature was the filtration, which protected against all known lethal gases. And the language on top says, presentation Distinguished Service Medal to Dr. Connell by Major General George B. Duncan for Omaha, Nebraska. And this mask is also known as a single line of defense. It was an all-in-one line of defense. Because of the limited supply of sponge rubber, production of the Connell mask stopped at 1,000. I secretly also think that the metal component was probably too expensive, and they were trying to figure out a cheaper way to come up with a cheaper mask. Dr. Connell then worked on the other designs to develop the RFK mask. 3 million of these masks were made, retaining many of the design features of the Connell model. American soldiers suffered only 2% of casualties in World War I for 72,807 men, compared to 13.4 casualties of some other countries. Connell innovations were also carried in the US Navy Mk2 head canister type in 1919. The types of military war gases used were chlorine, phosgene, diphosgene, lewisite, and the worst, dichloroethyl sulfide, also known as mustard gas. And that's mostly what they're protecting against. So this is a mask that could filter all these different gases. So here is my grandfather getting a presentation for his award, still taking care, and my grandmother next to him, she is still taking care of Clarence Roof till his death in 1923. And they get married in 1922. Karl Connell, Major, Medical Corps, United States Army, for exceptionally meritorious and distinguished service in the chemical warfare service. Practically alone and unaided and at great personal risk of his life, he exposed himself unhesitatingly to the highest concentrations of deadly gases while working with experimental models of the mask. Major Connell invented, tested out, and perfected the new type of gas mask superior to any then in existence, thereby rendering services of inestimable value to the American expeditionary forces. And later it says, kisses his wife in public. After his work for the war, Dr. Connell returned to Omaha to accept a position of professor of surgery at Creighton University School of Medicine. The doctor also owned his own surgical hospital for a time before quitting due to a heart attack at age 46. At this time, Roof also passed away due to pneumonia. Dr. Connell takes an early rest in Wintoon, but is still inventing. Dr. Connell in front of Winton Lodge. During the Depression, the doctor builds anesthetic tables right on the Winton property and keeps the valley gainfully employed. These are the type of machines Dr. Connell builds in Wintoon, keeping locals gainfully employed and training them in brand new skills. It's a Connell 1936 model. He later develops another model, which isn't quite as cumbersome. Here's an image of what was being built up in the Catskills. Besides building his machines, Connell oversees the construction of the new guest house in 1930, which has adze stairs. Adze is a type of tool that you can use to chip at wood, and stone fireplaces. The old house burned down because the furnace was overstoked. They did not fire the man who overstoked the furnace. My grandfather just said, okay, I hope you got the lesson and we'll be more careful in the future. These are examples of some of the fireplaces built from local stones, examples of the adze beams in some of the great rooms of the place. Examples of the really ingenious and very simple door openers, just a very simple design. And this is a chair designed by Karl Connell. And this is my mother's baby chair. The doctor made an initial impression of his butt in plaster and then carved the first chair. Orville Crawford, master carpenter from Claryville, made the rest. My grandmother's comment, the colosso eagle of the male, he thinks he has the perfect seat. Another thing my grandfather did was work on the stone house, where he perfected, it was a former guardhouse at the end of Wintoon Preserve, where potentially the Taylor mill was also located. Karl tests poured concrete into form, dropping the stones into wood forms, and creates this stone wall. The croft on the croft on Blue Hill Road at the end of the west branch of the Neversink, originally owned by Govine, then Murnane, was acquired by Frank, adding to the total length of the stream about 5.8 miles. The Wintoon Fly Fishing Club presently rents the 5.8 miles of stream. Their organization was formed to promote, encourage, and provide opportunities for and to preserve natural space for sporting activities, in particular trout fishing in the state of New York. The corporation intends to provide education on various trout fishing techniques. And this is one of our swimming holes, Leroy's. Frank at 76, holding up one of the largest fish pulled out of the stream by her son, Karl Connell Jr. The fish was named Julius Caesar. What was it, 23 pounds or something? Or 23 feet, 23 inches? Okay. Frank was the founding member of one of the earliest women's fly fishing clubs. We actually believe it might be the only women's fly fishing club She founded it with Julia Fairchild. She had learned to fish at the hands of John Burroughs. And for years, the clubhouse on the old Beetle home is now the YMCA property. The Women's Fishing Club has moved to the Beaverkill River, where for their elderly members, it's a little easier to cast into the water. Frank lives to 102, enjoying Wintoon all her adult life. Frank had 3 children with Dr. Connell, Barbara C. Mooney, Karl Connell Jr., and my mother, Joya Connell. Here's a slide. Joya Connell seen here with the descendants of Raphael Gavin. There's my mother with Louise and Helen and them as kids. So I have to especially thank here the great work of my uncle who wrote the book Wintoon, also biographer of an inventor by Dr. Karl Connell, biography of an inventor by Dr. Karl Connell, and additional research includes picturesque Ulster and Catskill Rivers, the birthplace of American fly fishing by Austin M. Francis. I have a special thanks to Andrew Kramer and Trina Lodge, who now own Wintoon and are doing an amazing job of restoring the place to original splendor. So that's it for this slideshow. I'm going to segue now to a video we have of my grandmother at 100 being interviewed by her children. Let's see, I hope this works. No, that doesn't do it. Let me see. I think I have to start it. It worked earlier. I'll just relaunch it, sorry. Take a minute or two to load. And I have to thank my cousin Kim for his work in making this video.
I'd like you to tell us what you thought were the particular traits of your husband, Dr. Connell. What do you recall most about him that you found his strength?
Just a little bit more of everything than anyone else.
He was a wonderful man. He's a very warm person, don't you think?
Very warm.
This is my uncle Karl Connell interviewing my grandmother who's 100.
And, somehow we belong together.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mums, you had children quite late in life. Did you find it difficult to have children so late?
No,
when you were 40 and more?
No.
No problems at all, right?
No, they all were so perfect.
I see. No, I'm certainly glad to hear that, and I agree with that 100%. Have you noticed any differences in your children? Do you think they're different kind of people?
Oh, well, I think they're all different, but they're all very agreeable to each other.
Do you remember the two?
This is my Aunt Barbara.
From Yama Farms who came up here to play? Wasn't that Joseph and Rosa Levine?
Yes, it was. Joseph Levine. And they had a place up here in the Catskill.
I can remember the afternoon they came. Mother, Carl was about 4 and I think I was 6, and we sat on the stairs and watched Mr. Levine play. And as I recall, he had a toupee that kept slipping.
Yeah.
And Carl got in such giggles, and you were really quite angry with us for giggling during this beautiful piano sonata. But we could see every time he brought his hands down for a major chord, we could see this wig slipping a little more to the side. Do you remember that? No.
Well, I do remember that there was something there that was wrong. It should be fixed. My daughter went in to have some dentistry done, and the dentist said, "Oh, I have the most wonderful gift this morning. and I'm having great fun with it. And he showed her this little timer. And she said, oh, that's just what would please my mother. So she tried to get one, and it was very easy for her to get them. And I've used it ever since. When she isn't here, I get the little timer.
How does it work?
And I just press a little button. And it tells you the time.
What time is it?
2:08 p.m.
That's very nice.
Oh, well, we've got plenty of time.
And this is my cousin,
Plenty of
Lad.
And what's a good anecdote about Dr. Connell?
good anecdote about him.
Yes. Oh, tell us how he made the beautiful wooden chairs in the other porch, Mother.
I think your father did.
Yes, and how did he
Well,
develop the seat for those chairs?
He was developing gas masks
Yes.
at the time for his new gas mask, you see, which he received the DSM for.
Right.
And he said, I can make a chair that I think would be just right for Julia, who was very young at the time. And in that first chair, he developed, as he was making the masks for the face, he also made a seat,
Of plaster of Paris.
of plaster of Paris.
And who sat in that seat to develop the perfect seat?
I think with Julia, wasn't it?
Well, didn't Dad sit in that? And you used to say the colossal ego of the male thinking he had the perfect seat.
Yes, that was it.
That was it,
That's
wasn't
what
it?
I said. Really, what you remembered it better than I did. But I remember saying it now.
Yes, you did. Right. And I remember seeing him sit in that seat. And he had his pants down and he had white underwear that were one piece and buttoned up the front, you know, and they had their little legs, and it was quite proper. And he sat in that seat with gauze over it and formed the seat that all those chairs are carved from.
And he did the first one himself.
He did. I didn't realize he carved the first one
Oh,
himself.
yes, he carved the first one and showed the man in Harryville, who was a very fine carpenter, how to do it.
Was that Orville Crawford?
Yes, it's all.
Orville Crawford, yes. Mhm.
And so then when I came back in the spring, there were all these seats and you sit in them and you're perfectly comfortable. In most wooden chairs, you can't stand them more than 5 minutes.
This is High Falls. It's an aerial view.
I used to play quite well in the little orchestra I belonged to in Omaha, Nebraska. I wasn't there very long, but I had very gifted friends right near me who played magnificently, and some of them professional. But all I played was one part, and it was necessary. And they said I did quite well, but I apologized for just fumbling on the keyboard at this time.
What do you remember most about the old days?
Well, I remember also about having a beautiful time and doing pretty much as I pleased, and being of some use to the people around me, reading to them, and fishing. And every day was something to look forward to. It might be a good fishing day, or it might be a good day to go hunting around. I never was a hunter, but I loved to drive horses. And we always had great, very fine horses in those days. We had one drive every afternoon. And if we went down the road and we opened a road back of some of the side of the mountains, and it took just about an hour to go down and get back. And that's what we did every afternoon. And we had, in those days, we lived very well and always had a trout course for dinner. And my friend John Burroughs, I heard of him being in the place nearby, and I had been invited down there for dinner. And I met him, and I told him about the lovely place we had about 10, 20 miles beyond. And I said, we have very good trout fishing at times. Would you like to come? And he said, just ask me. And so I did just ask him, and he became my very personal friend. I was a young girl at the time, but he reached out his arm and showed me how to catch the very best trout and the time of day in which to do it. And that was a great help.
What do you think is the most important thing that you learned in the last 99 years?
Well, you're not conscious of learning anything, you just go right on.
That's sort of indomitable, isn't that marvelous? Well, it's a wonderful philosophy. I'm going to give you a kiss.
Okay, and that's that she continues to play. So that's the end of our show. Thank you for all coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. At 100 playing, just kept her young. Shall I stop? When do I suppose they brought in electricity?
Yeah.
I think that he brought in lines very early on for phone lines. He brought in lines so he could speak to this would be Roof, of course. He brought in phone lines so he could speak to the guard stations at either end, so they could warn him of things that was going on. So if you have a phone line, you have electricity. So I'd imagine it was, early 1900s, whenever you could really start bringing that kind of stuff in. I don't know how he powered it, but it would have been taken quite a lot to get a line up there, considering it takes us a difficulty just to get decent internet up where we are. Any other questions?
When did she pass away?
Let me see, 1880. So she would have passed away in 1986. She lived to 102. She was very clear-minded until the last 6 months of her life. What basically took her down was she got dehydrated, which is a constant problem for elderly folks. And she got taken into a nursing home, and then she really sort of, once you got moved out of her home, she really kind of wasn't herself anymore. It was kind of sad. Yeah, my mother would have preferred that she had been able, if she could have died in her own home, but that wasn't possible.
When did Winton Waters
go from being private property to more available to everybody?
Well, it's still very much private property. So all we do now is the stream is all incorporated, and we rent that out to a fishing club. But so there is no public access on the stream. None of it's public. Just want to make that really clear to people. There is what's happened over the years is that different properties next to the stream have been sold. Like the Kramers now own what is originally Wintoon, and other lots of land have gone to other parties. And, you know, there's still family members who own other bits of land next to the stream, but the stream is all incorporated as a family entity.
Oh.
Right. Trying to preserve it that way. Okay, thank you.
So I guess John Burroughs came from Woodchuck Lodge.
Well,
He said something about 10 to 20 miles. He had a house over there.
yeah, but he probably did a lot of ramblings in general and probably stayed at a bunch of different places on the way. I doubt he came in one day.
Yeah.
But he would probably stay and you know, stay for a week or two. I think that's what you did in those days.
There's a sign that said something about John Burroughs on the East Branch Road.
Oh, it does.
Up to Denning, up toward the farm camp.
And the little sign I included was the sign at the top of Slide Mountain.
Yeah.
Little memorial on Slide Mountain to him.
You mentioned Ymca Farms too. Now that's in Neversink. That was in Neversink.
Oh, I apologize. I thought that was.
I got a book out of the library once. The people had talked about it, how Edison had gone there and Firestone and but it was a big fishing area. It's right by Honk Falls where that brown house is always falling down with the tarp on the roof.
Okay.
I think that was the guard.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
That was a fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was great to see Karl Connell. I know with Joya, it was your dad. He just had such a spirit. Just such a wonderful person.
Yeah.
There were 3 children.
Junior.
And how many grandchildren?
So 3 children, just a sidebar, because my uncle asked, my grandmother had my mother, who was the youngest of the 3 children, at 45. So that was unusual for the time. And of the 3 children, there are 12 grandchildren. Yeah, yeah. So.
For our virtual attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself. I believe I put in a request to unmute as well, but if you have any questions, please, we'd love to hear them.
No?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, well, we wrap it up now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your attending. And thank you. I really appreciate this. Okay.